Welcome to episode 2 of the WalterPicks Fantasy Football Show. Today, we are going to be going through the AFC North teams, starting with the Baltimore Ravens. I'm excited for this one, guys. The Ravens, to me, have, in my opinion, the greatest rushing quarterback of all time and the greatest pure rusher at running back of all time in the same backfield. Not saying Derrick Henry's in his prime, but I think over the course of career, I feel pretty comfortable saying that. I've been calling Lamar Jackson the greatest rushing quarterback of all time for at least 3 years now. I think if he ended his career 2 years ago, still would have been the greatest rushing quarterback of all time. He's coming off pretty much his second straight MVP season statistically. Josh Allen won the actual MVP award, but he finished his QB1 in points per game last year, 25.7 points per game for Lamar. Really didn't have many bad games last season. He's getting drafted as quarterback 2 on most platforms right now, Sleeper and Underdog most notably, but he's going first in plenty of drafts. It's him or Josh Allen being the first quarterback taken in almost every single fantasy football draft. He's going, honestly, a little bit later than I think Lamar Jackson would have gone in past fantasy seasons. He's going in round 2 or 3 of most drafts that I have seen. Derrick Henry is right around where he was last year in drafts after he smashed last season, finishes as the running back 4. This is PPR too. The running back 4 in 19.1 points per game for Derrick Henry last season. Every year there's people fading the big dog, and every year he produces. Even without significant receiving volume, he is scoring touchdowns almost every single game. His prop lines are near 100 almost every single game. I mean, it truly is a very, very safe bet almost every single week. He's getting drafted as running back 6 on Underdog right now, running back 4 on Sleeper. The WalterPicks app, we have him at running back 7. We have Lamar, by the way, right now at QB1, just ahead of Josh Allen, but right in the same tier as him. The backup running back situation, this team overall really hasn't changed. The depth chart has not changed. The only notable addition is DeAndre Hopkins, who was probably going to slide in as their wide receiver 3, but Keaton Mitchell is supposed to be back. He missed pretty much all of last season, and when he returned, he really didn't get very much playing time. We saw a Devon Achane like short stint from him in his rookie season where he was just hyper efficient on low volume. Maybe we see him in a role like that again, but Justice Hill's back. He's likely going to be the running back 2 here. Not really a clear plan. If Derrick Henry goes down, this offense looks a lot different. Zay Flowers is going to be the wide receiver 1. Again, he's heading into year 3, I believe. Wide receiver 33 in points per game last season. He's getting drafted on Sleeper, well ahead of that, at wide receiver 24, and Underdog a little bit more reasonable at wide receiver 31. We're a little bit behind both those right now in the WalterPicks app at wide receiver 35, and obviously want to talk through some of the assumptions we have for this team in the WalterPicks app projections, but we do expect this to be a pretty run-heavy team. This is one of the most run-heavy teams in the NFL last season. 53.7% of their plays were runs last year. One of the very few teams in the NFL, over 50% of their plays were runs, and that's what's going to happen when you have the greatest rushing quarterback of all time and the greatest rusher of all time in the backfield. I mean, it really is just something to admire every single Sunday. For me, all I really care about is the Patriots and my fantasy teams, but I got to say, as a football fan, getting to see these two guys in the same backfield is definitely something to witness. Last season, Derrick Henry, let me pull this up really quickly. It was somewhat similar to the Saquon Barkley shift, where he was going into such a better environment than he had been in, Derrick Henry with the Ravens. He ends up averaging 5.8 yards per carry last season, the second most in the NFL. The only running back that averaged more yards per carry than him was Sean Tucker, who had hundreds of fewer carries. Saquon Barkley was just behind him. Jahmyr Gibbs, we talked about in the Lions episode, his crazy efficiency wasn't even as efficient as King Henry last season. He's heading into his age 31 season now, but he really doesn't look like he's slowing down. I know I jumped to Zay Flowers, definitely getting drafted ahead of where he finished last year. We're not projecting too much difference there. They did add DeAndre Hopkins. We're not projecting a huge target share for him. We have the target share distribution right now, 25% to Zay Flowers, 19% to Bateman, only 7% to DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins had some moments for the Chiefs last year, but he's well past his prime at this point. I don't think he is necessarily a lock to take this wide receiver 3 role, but they don't really have much behind him. It's Devontae Walker, who's going to be in year 2. Didn't do much in year 1. Tylan Wallace, Malik Cunningham, who's a converted quarterback. Anthony Miller's on the bottom of the step chart. He probably won't make the team. The next up receivers is the tight ends, and they have 2 elite tight ends that I'm very curious to hear both your guys' takes on your approach to them in fantasy this season. I certainly have not gotten a lot of Andrews. I prefer likely at their current costs. Last year, Mark Andrews finished as tight end 8 in points per game on the season. He started really, really rough, and he ended the season on a really rough note too, dropping the 2-point conversion in the playoffs to knock the Ravens out of the playoffs. And that's really the only thing Lamar hasn't been able to overcome in the NFL. The only thing he hasn't been able to achieve is playoff success. So that one definitely has a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Doesn't seem to be hurting his cost too much though. But yeah, he started the season really rough. He didn't have a single game over 9.5 PPR points in the first month of the season. And he had back-to-back donuts in weeks 3 and 4, 0 points. I remember seriously discussing dropping Mark Andrews after week 4, where he had combined for 12 fantasy points the first month of the season. He really turned it up after that, only had 2 games under 9.5 points the rest of the season. Definitely was not a guy you wanted to drop. Kyle Pitts ended up being the right guy to drop, and Andrews was the wrong guy to drop a month in last year. The problem for me with Mark Andrews is I'm not sure he's the best tight end on his own team. I think Isaiah Likely is more so in his prime than Andrews is. Andrews adding into his age 30 season now. Likely still, I think, an ascending player. He has a better size-adjusted athleticism than Andrews, brings, I think, a little bit of a different element, a little bit less of a red zone threat than Andrews, but both had incredible touchdown rates last season that we're projecting to likely, pun intended, continue in 2025. Tight end 1 in touchdown percentage, Mark Andrews last season at 19.6%. Isaiah Likely was tight end 3 at 15.4%. I mean, these guys were scoring touchdowns on over 15% of their catches, which is on one side a little bit scary to see if they'll maintain that, but also that's what you get with this Ravens offense. So I do think they will continue to score touchdowns at a high rate, and they both are potential league winners if the other suffers an injury, or there has been some Mark Andrews trade rumors that have been swirling around this offseason. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen before the NFL season, but it would make some sense for the Ravens to move him because they have Isaiah Likely waiting in the background, and their costs are not even close right now. An underdog Isaiah Likely's going is, I think, tight end 16 in that area, while Andrews going is tight end 8. Likely only averaged 7.8 PPR points per game, so 3 points less. But we saw some spike weeks from him, so I've been clicking on him a bit in best ball. Obviously, these big tournaments too. He's an injury away from potentially being a top 5 tight end. That's the ceiling case for him. Rashad Bateman had his moments last season. He's definitely going to be a sleeper candidate in a lot of fantasy leagues late in drafts. Right now, he's getting drafted as wide receiver 61 on Sleeper, wide receiver 56 on Underdog. We have him well ahead of that at wide receiver 51. He had plenty of spike weeks, but was a bit inconsistent last season. He had about half his games under 8 PPR points. He also had 5 games over 15 PPR points, sort of a big play threat. Most of his games, he only had 2 games with more than 4 catches. So low volume, high efficiency receiver, sort of a pseudo Jameson Williams, if you will, but on a team that runs the ball a ton. So he's outside the top 50 wide receivers in ADP and our ranks. So not a guy that we see having tons of league winning upside, even with a 19% target share on a good offense. I want to get your guys' takes on these tight ends, and I also want to discuss how we're approaching Zay Flowers and thoughts on this backfield. Let's start at the top of the depth chart here, though. Lamar Jackson. You guys comfortable taking Lamar Jackson in draft, Seth? Are you including Lamar Jackson in this Josh Allen tier? Maybe Jaden Daniels is a step below, but in that same tier. Jalen Hurts maybe another step below in a similar tier. But these are the 4 sort of elite rushing QBs. Are you comfortable taking Lamar, the same place you're taking Josh Allen?
Yeah, for me, I'm really like a Josh Allen or pass kind of fantasy drafter this season. Main reason is just there's been a little bit of inconsistency from year to year, where when you look at Josh Allen, he's like quarterback 1, quarterback 2, quarterback 1, 24 points per game is almost been a lock for Josh Allen year after year after year. And I love how he even turns up in the fantasy football playoffs when the snow's on the ground in Buffalo. You almost know you're getting a huge week from Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson falls a little bit more in the tier of some other, round 3 guys, like some of the running backs, some of the wide receivers that I'm really excited about. So when I'm really excited about the positional players, I generally wait on my quarterback till later on.
Yeah, definitely a fair point. We do every single year we see Josh Allen's rushing volume increase in the fantasy football playoffs as the Bills are pushing for the 1 seed or playoff contention down the stretch. Last year we saw that with Lamar in week 1 when he played the Chiefs. I believe in that first game, I think he had 122 rushing yards in that game. Had like a ridiculous rush share. I don't have it in front of me right now. I think it was he had a 50% rush share, half the team's carries in that first game. He's treating like a playoff game coming into week 1 against the returning champs. But yeah, not something we saw the rest of the season really from Lamar. And yeah, last year was a bit of an outlier for him in terms of his finishes. He had a career year in terms of points per game, 25.6. He hadn't hit that since his second season, where he had 28.2 points per game. He had 36 passing touchdowns that season and similar rushing numbers to what we saw last year. 12, actually even better rushing numbers. He had 1,200 rushing yards and 7 rushing TDs plus 36 passing touchdowns. Last season, he had actually 5 more passing touchdowns than that, but 300 less rushing yards, 3 less rushing touchdowns. Every other season, he's been over 20 points per game, but not quite in that elite tier. Josh Allen, you're right, is a little bit more consistent. He's been over 24 fantasy points per game in 4 of his last 5 seasons. Last year was actually a dip in his fantasy points per game at 22.7. So he definitely brings a slightly safer floor. And I think, they have pretty comparable ceilings. I'm personally fine taking Lamar shortly after Josh Allen goes. My general approach to this elite QB tier is I want to just get the 4th guy here across Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. That'll be different, a little bit different in most drafts, but in most drafts I've been doing, that's been Jalen Hurts. But there's so much good late round QB options this year with Fields and May that I have not gotten as much elite QB as I would have expected. Are you guys just sort of accepting Derrick Henry is not slowing down and we shouldn't be fading the king anymore? Avery, are you comfortable taking Derrick Henry where he's going? He's going in, I think in most season long drafts, he might start to creep into the back end of round 1, but right now his ADP has him firmly the very beginning of round 2, like the first 6 picks of round 2 of almost every draft is where Derrick Henry is going as the running back 6 to 7, running back 4 to 7. No, running back 6 on Underdog, running back 4 on Sleeper. So he's going 10th overall on Sleeper. They do have him in the first round, 14th on Underdog, where I've done most of my drafts so far. But yeah, Avery, how are you approaching Derrick Henry this season?
Derrick Henry, to me, if he's going in the first round, I cannot get behind that. Derrick Henry, for some reason, somehow the fantasy football gods, this guy is 32 years old almost and still producing as around a top 5 running back. I don't know how it's possible. You look at the stats, everything is there. Like his yards per carry is there, 5.8 yards per carry. The only thing that is not there is the receiving work. 4.4% team target share last year. That's not going to change. But with that being said, he's going to get the volume. With him getting older, I could 100% see him being on the field less, similar to kind of what we're seeing with Travis Kelce. Last year, he didn't have one game over 75% of the snaps, but that doesn't matter because every time he's on the field, he's going to get the ball and he's going to get touches. I am a little bit hesitant if he's going in the first round, a top fringe 5-6 running back. I can't really get behind it, but he is going to get his touches. He is going to get his touchdowns, but there is a lot of talent in the NFL right now too.
Yeah, I think for me it comes down to who you're taking him over, and that's where I think as I was thinking back to on some of my answers to our first episode of the show with some of the Vikings players and looking back at some of the ADPs, I think I would change my answer on pass over draft, just looking at some of the players they're going around, and yeah, I'm taking Achane over Derrick Henry. I think that's the line for me. Then I would likely take Henry over Jonathan Taylor, Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs in that tier. But I also really like the receivers going in that range too. Puka Nakua, Neighbors, Nico, Brian Thomas, Drake London, like all those guys in a PPR league, I'm definitely strongly considering over Henry. I'm not going to fade Henry though. Like if he slides past those guys, I'm certainly going to click on him. In half PPR, I'm going to be a lot more likely to take Derrick Henry. In a non PPR, he's basically just a cheat code and should be a first round pick in every single non PPR format. Part of the reason that the WalterPicks app is so powerful is it will adjust for your settings. One of the hardest things to do as a content creator is give advice for all the millions of different settings out there, but I think Derrick Henry is one of the most setting sensitive players too, where I'm a lot less likely to target him in PPR and a lot more likely to target him as the scoring goes up.
I'm taking Derrick Henry in the first round. I think at pick 12, if you've got the turn, I am going double running back there almost every time. If it's Genty, Achane, and Henry, and there is 2 of the 3 of those left, I am stacking up on 2 running backs to start the round, because I do think, I mean, we talked a little about, mentioned Jameson Williams, George Pickens. We're going to talk about some other wide receivers in this episode, and I think you can get those wide receiver talents later on. So I personally will go Derrick Henry in the first round, especially if you got that turn pick, so you can double up on some of the amazing talent that is there, that some of the guys you mentioned as well.
Yeah, I'm curious on the Ashton Genty one. Ashton Genty is, I think I would take him over Henry as well. In addition to Achane, I think go Achane over Genty. The more I thought about that one, but
I agree as well.
Super close. I would go with McCaffrey over Derrick Henry as well. And I know we are talking about the 49ers here, but I will go into McCaffrey rant, I'm sure, at some point on this show. I'm just like kind of comfortable with that risk. But what about you, Avery? Are you taking Genty over Henry, or would you prefer Henry over Genty? The shiny new thing, or the sturdy vet that has produced fantasy points every year for the past like 5 years in a row?
It depends more of the team you're going for. I think Derrick Henry is going to be way safer. I've been in enough live streams and enough videos where people have given me pushback on Ashton Genty. Personally, I'm taking a little bit more of the risk. I'm going with Ashton Genty. I think that he is locked in for a lot of usage, and as well in the receiving game, which Derrick Henry is not.
Yeah, I saw one of our creators on the team called Ashton Genty Rashad Penny with a better marketing team. I definitely do not agree with that take. He is a much better prospect than Rashad Penny, and I am in on Genty at his current cost around the draft time. And I am definitely suffering from a pretty bad case of rookie fever. But around the NFL draft time, I thought there was a pretty good argument you could take Genty with a top 5 pick in fantasy, and I still think that is within the range of outcomes where we look back and we think Genty should have been a top 3 pick in fantasy, and he could lead the NFL in touches. And there's just way higher receiving volume for him, but a much worse offense too. I mean, this Ravens offense is very bankable with Lamar at the helm. I am curious to talk about Zay Flowers. He is one of the more polarizing players, definitely the type of player that I often fall too in love with. I love the short after the catch type receivers, and Zay Flowers has been that. He was pretty consistent last year, and just in terms of producing over 10 fantasy points from week 5 on, he was only under 10 points once or twice, not including week 18. Did struggle a bit also to start the season, similar to Mark Andrews. They did have some of these games for the Ravens. This is the problem for a lot of these pass catchers is they get these massive leads and they're running so efficiently. Even if they don't have massive leads, they just know they can run with Lamar and with Henry, that there's just not enough pass volume to go around. So sometimes Flowers can just get game scripted out. He only had 3 games over 20 points as well. He's going like round 5 through 7 right now in most drafts. So a pretty steep cost for Flowers. I personally, with the guys going around him, have not gotten a ton of Zay Flowers, and not a guy I'll be targeting super aggressively this season. How are you guys approaching Zay Flowers? We have him as wide receiver 35 in the WalterPicks app right now, which, as I mentioned before, is behind his current ADP at wide receiver 24 on Sleeper and wide receiver 31 on Underdog. Seth, you want to give your take first here?
Yeah, this is a guy I missed out on his rookie season, and I've kind of been chasing after him since, because when he gets the ball, they call him like the joystick. That's what Lamar Jackson calls him, and it's true. I mean, he has that kind of Gibbs like, Jameson Williams like. He gets the ball and he makes his opponents look like they're not NFL players. But I am really with the WalterPicks app this year because it's just the inconsistency, the amount of times the Ravens do run away with a game. It is concerning. And I think this year, especially looking at the AFC North, they'll probably have some good games against the Bengals, maybe, where Zay Flowers is great. But I think even in that game, the game plan is to Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson your way to victory. And I think the NFL is kind of changing into you're either a top team or you're kind of a bottom team in a lot of ways. And that's going to lead, I think, to a lot of running this year. That's why I'm so in on Derrick Henry. And for that reason, I'm with the WalterPicks app. I'll take him if he falls back really far to like a flex, like a true flex option. But at wide receiver 24, I think I'd much rather go with some other option.
Yeah, and he did take a step back in fantasy points per game last year, just slightly, 13.1 in his rookie season, and the price to get him in his rookie season, was much lower than last year and this year as well. Last year, 12.9, so zero point 0.2 less, and that was really the touchdowns. And this is the problem for me with Zay Flowers: is what is the real touchdown ceiling here when you have Likely and Andrews as such big threats, Lamar and Henry as such big threats in the red zone? Only a 5.5% touchdown rate last year, 7% his rookie season. Walter's projecting him for a 7.4% touchdown rate. So some positive regression expected. We're projecting for a career best touchdown rate right now, though, and we're still behind ADP. And in situations like that, it's hard for me to see a really optimistic picture where he, can score 10 plus touchdowns in a season and really hit that elite outcome we want in fantasy. And for me, Rashad Bateman is, I think, just like a slightly more volatile version of Flowers. Flowers without the floor, but with a similar ceiling, I think, to Zay Flowers. Is Bateman a guy you guys are willing to target late in drafts? He's going, I think, in the rounds 10 to 14 range in a 12-team league. The ADP's wide receiver 56 on Underdog, wide receiver 61 on Sleeper. We are a bit ahead right now at wide receiver 51. But is this a guy you think could actually help you win a fantasy league?
Rashad Bateman, to me, is a guy that you can take at that ADP. He's not somebody that requires an insane amount of targets to be a fantasy football viable guy. Last year, he was the wide receiver 5 in touchdown rate at 20%. That's high for a guy that gets the amount of targets that he gets. At his ADP, going past the top 50 wide receivers, even later on some draft sites like Sleeper and ESPN, it's worth a flyer.
Yeah. What about you, Seth? Are you in agreement with Avery? The cost is obviously not super high, and obviously we got to factor in the cost here as well.
Yeah, factoring the cost for me, I'm still not interested. There's too many guys in that range. You're talking about Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, Tucker Kraft. You're also talking about some guys that have like one injury away, like a Emeka Egbuka. I'd rather use those later round picks on some of those guys I think could be true league winners than someone that I'm going to plug into my flex when someone's on bye.
Yeah, the best ball brain in me is okay clicking on Bateman. I'm the best ball brain in me, if you guys are starting to tell, I'm pretty comfortable clicking on most people, especially as they slip past their ADP, since I'm doing so many of these drafts. And in season long, at this point of the draft, I think I lean closer to what Seth is saying here. Of this isn't really the point of the draft where I want to be taking receivers. For me, like he's near this sort of end of tier that he could fill in on a bye week, and I don't think he's that much different than Cedric Tillman, who we're going to get to at the end. I feel that way with a huge portion of this tier at wide receiver of like, is Cedric Tillman that much different than Bateman? Cedric Tillman could easily get more targets this season than Bateman on obviously a much worse offense. But Trey Harris, I do like Luther Burden a bit in this area. I think his ceiling's higher than Bateman's, but obviously not a guy we're going to be able to rely on at the very beginning of the season. No, we already talked about him. Keon Coleman, similar thing. These guys that I just don't see league-winning outcomes from. Coleman, maybe there's a bit of a better story attached to Allen in year 2. Cooper Kupp, Jaden Higgins, like all these guys are not guys I want starting at wide receiver for me, and I want to finish up my wide receiver starting lineup before then. And yeah, he's going around Tyler Warren, David Njoku, who we're going to talk about, Tucker Kraft, Colton Loveland. If you punt tight end, this is sort of the time of the draft to do that. This is also around the time of the draft that I'm taking Justin Fields and Drake May and reaching a bit ahead of ADP to secure those guys on my roster. And I'm not going to lose sweat over passing on Bateman for that. So yeah, just looking at the guys going around him, I think I agree here with Seth. I want to just jump to the tight ends now quick. Andrews, he's going around tight end 8 right now. On Underdog, it's tight end 7. Sleeper, it's tight end 8. We have him a couple spots behind that at tight end 9. Likely, on the other hand, at least on Underdog, he's going as tight end 15. A really big pick discrepancy here. So on Underdog, he's going at Andrews is going at pick 106. Likely is going at pick 141. Andrews did have the better fantasy season last year. There was a comment from the coaching staff just a few weeks or months ago that they want Isaiah Likely to be an all-pro. That's their expectation of him. Obviously, really high expectation. I'm personally just not sure who's the better tight end here. And so that's just instantly going to default me to Likely at his cost. And my general tight end strategy this year too is getting Bowers, McBride, Kittle, or just waiting until that like Rashad Bateman area of the draft. and Andrews is gone by that part of the draft, most likely. And Isaiah likely still sitting there, much later. If you could be the last person in your league to draft a tight end in rounds 13, 14, 15, and you can just double click on likely and Brenton Strange or likely and Dallas Goddard in really late in drafts, and I think you could work out just fine. And invest the least capital possible at the tight end position. Are you guys in on Andrews, Avery? How are you approaching Andrews and likely this season in fantasy drafts?
Yeah, the way that I've been drafting this early, and ADPs will change when we get closer to draft season and when the NFL starts. Mark Andrews just does not end up on my team. I'm with Sam on you either get an elite tight end, one of the top 3, 4, or you kind of just punt and you wait. And Mark Andrews, as far as a fantasy point per game score, compared to some of the guys getting drafted a bit lower than him, isn't high enough for me to take that pick instead of maybe a higher upside running back or wide receiver in that range. I think likely is like on the trajectory up. He's a younger tight end. Mark Andrews, I believe, is 32, 30 years old.
Yep.
I like likely better than Mark Andrews.
Yeah, are you in agreement with us on this as well, Seth?
I mean, I do like likely better than Andrews. I'll draft them both as a combo, honestly. If there's a big if here, and it's that if the ADP stays the same, because one of the problems with likely is that he's got so much upside and everybody loves him, I think for good reason, that you always have to kind of reach for him. But the problem with that is as we do more and more and more drafts and Andrews drafters reach for him about a half round early, his ADP is going to keep climbing to the point where they're going to get closer as drafts come in, and that's going to make it unpurchasable. So if he stays around where he's at, I'll combo him up because you're almost guaranteed good tight end value week in, week out. There's an injury. You may just win your league getting one of those two guys later on. I like that upside. Likely is definitely my preferred option. But if he starts to fall in the draft, you're in round 8, 9, you're happy with your team at that point. Maybe you're waiting on a late quarterback. I'm fine taking Andrews off the board. This is the cheapest he's ever been. And if he has a little bit of a comeback season, again, you just may win your league.
It's true. Yeah, we have seen a league winning season from Mark Andrews, and it doesn't feel like he's quite at the cliff, like Travis Kelce is. But yeah, we've seen Mark Andrews finish as a top 7 tight end in fantasy points per game each of the last 6 seasons, every season but his rookie season. Last year being the worst at tight end 7. Every other season he was a top 5 tight end in fantasy points per game. Now he's getting drafted at tight end 8, tight end 9. And just for some quick insight into the projections we have for these two tight ends right now, we're projecting Andrews for a 17% target share, likely for a 16% target share. And with the efficiencies that we're projecting, we're pretty in line with the ADPs, but like 1 or 2 spots behind for both guys. And this is how projections end up when you have two guys playing the same position like this. The projections are always going to look a bit negatively on situations like that. Projections ultimately are just one tool for that reason. But yeah, things break right for either of these guys. I think they're capable of winning leagues. I like the cost a bit more for likely, but yeah, very fair points from Seth on Mark Andrews. All right, we're going to do a quick drafter pass for Zay Flowers, and then we'll go through. I think we had differing opinions on Andrews. Let's do Zay Flowers and Andrews just to recap here really quick. All right, so draft or pass on Zay Flowers. I'm going to be passing on Zay Flowers this season, mostly just because of the other players getting drafted around his cost. So not necessarily anything so much I hate about Flowers. I just don't think the league winning ceiling is there like you can get at some other positions at that draft cost. Avery, are you drafting or passing on Zay Flowers at his current ADP?
I am also passing if you have to take him as a top 25 wide receiver. I agree with WalterPicks rank more down towards the 30s, but higher than that, I'm away from that.
Yeah, the sleeper cost is definitely a bit out of control in comparison to the other platforms. Seth, where are you at? Are you drafting or passing on Zay?
I'm gonna pass as well. It's too risky, especially when it comes to fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, and I will note this feels like one of the teams that the offense could change really, really dramatically. Like the entire expectation and assumptions around this offense would change if Derrick Henry were to go down suddenly. I don't think this team would be nearly as run heavy. We didn't really touch on Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill at all. If Derrick Henry went down, they also have Rasheen Ali, who was a rookie last year, didn't really do anything. They'd probably add someone to help fill that role. Like I don't think Justice Hill or Keaton Mitchell or Rasheen Ali are going to just sort of slide into this workhorse role that Derrick Henry's in. But suddenly I would probably be on Zay Flowers in these tight ends a lot more if Derrick Henry weren't in the picture We know running backs do have high injury rates. So it's just something worth noting. Another sort of ceiling outcome, I think, for all these pass catchers in that scenario. But let's jump to Mark Andrews quick. I lean towards the pass side on Mark Andrews because I'm not convinced he's the best tight end on his own team, and you can get the other tight end on his team 6 to 8 rounds later. So I lean towards the pass side. Seth, are you drafting or passing Mark Andrews?
I will draft as long as you're willing to pay for the likely a little bit ahead of ADP. If not, you have to get both, in my opinion. He's a draft. If you're only going to take Mark Andrews, that would be a pass.
Avery, draft or pass with Mark Andrews?
I would disagree with having to take both of the tight ends. Little hot take here, just because I want to avoid the start sit nightmare that would be that, and I don't want to deal with putting one of them at my flex. As far as Mark Andrews goes, he's on a team that's almost last in passing volume. The touchdowns are there, but he's not going to be the true tight end one in receiving, which is going to give him a high upside to outperform the ADP. I think he can meet it. I don't think he can beat it, so I'm passing.
Just a quick best ball note here on these backup running backs, because I'm not going to draft either of these guys in season long. I don't think there's like a clear path to season long winning upside for Keaton Mitchell or Justice Hill. But in best ball, in the late rounds, I'm looking for running backs, especially in my zero running back teams, that catch passes. Justice Hill, 12.5% target share last year. I actually like just taking both these guys in some drafts if I'm really thin at running back. And together, they're probably going to go over a 15% target share this season. And both guys are capable of spike weeks because of the receiving role. But yeah, in season long drafts, I probably won't draft these guys a single time. I'd much prefer some of these handcuff running backs that'll score 0 points every week, but could actually be league winners